As soon as my husband found out he was coming into an inheritance, he announced, "Pack your bags. I'm a rich man now." He kicked me out the door and filed for divorce. I signed everything calmly, but the moment the lawyer read the will, he dropped to his knees in front of me. Welcome to the Twists of Destiny channel. Before we begin, drop a comment and let us know where you're tuning in from. We'd love to know. We hope you enjoy listening to this captivating story. Keziah woke up to the sound of her alarm at 5:30 a.m. It was still pitch black outside. Only the streetlights cast a dim glow over the snow-covered courtyard. She stretched, trying not to wake Tavarius, and carefully slipped out from under the quilt. The cold immediately stung her bare feet. The radiators in their drafty two-bedroom apartment on the south side were barely putting out any heat. In the bathroom, Keziah looked at her reflection in the mirror. 32 years old, but she looked every bit of 40. Dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide anymore. The first fine lines around her mouth. Hair that desperately needed a touch-up and a fresh braid. But she had neither the time nor the money for the salon. She ran a hand over her face, splashed it with ice-cold water, and started getting ready for work. "You up early again?" Tavarius's grumpy voice drifted from the bedroom. "I have to be at work by 8, Tav," Keziah answered softly, pulling on an old pilled sweater. "Go back to sleep. How am I supposed to rest with you making all that racket at the crack of dawn?" he grumbled, turning his face to the wall. Keziah bit her lip. Back in the day, 5 years ago when they first moved in together, Tavarius used to wake up with her. He'd send her off with a kiss, tell her she was the finest woman in the world. He'd brew her coffee while she got ready, kiss the top of her head, and promise to have dinner ready by the time she got home. But now every move she made just seemed to get on his nerves. In the kitchen, she quickly made instant coffee and ate a slice of toast with cheese while standing by the windowsill. There was never time for a proper breakfast. By 7 o'clock a.m., she was already walking out the door to catch the bus to the community health clinic where she worked as a front desk administrator. The job was tedious and monotonous. Answering phones, scheduling patients, dealing with insurance complaints and attitudes. The pay wasn't much, about $2,800 a month, but it was steady. And right now, it was the only real money coming into the household. Tavarius worked, well, Keziah didn't even know what to call it. He had been trying to launch his own empire for 3 years now. First, it was an online supplement store, then a consulting agency, then a computer repair service. Nothing ever stuck. The money they tried to save for a vacation, for a new fridge, for renovations, it all went into his next big project. And there were never any results. The most he brought in was maybe $500 or $600 a month. And that wasn't even every month. "I'm building a future," he would say every time Keziah timidly asked if maybe he should get a regular 9 to 5. Just temporarily. "You just don't understand how business works, Keziah. You gotta invest. You gotta have patience. Look at Jay-Z. Look at the big moguls. They all took risks." And Keziah endured. She took on a second job in the evenings. After the clinic, she did remote bookkeeping for small businesses. She sat at the computer until midnight, checking other people's invoices and balancing ledgers just to make ends meet by the end of the month, to pay the rent, the light bill, the internet, buy groceries, and ensure Tavarius had capital for his next genius idea. That gig brought in another $1,500 or $2,000, depending on the client load, sometimes more if she was lucky. The bus was late, and Keziah barely made it to the start of her shift. The whole day flew by in a blur of chaos, endless ringing phones, upset patients, demanding doctors. By lunch, she had a splitting headache, but it was too early to go home. After work, she had to stop by the grocery store, pick up food for dinner, and then sit down at the computer. She had a rush order pending, a financial report due by tomorrow evening. She got home around 9:00 p.m. Her arms ached from the heavy grocery bags. Her feet were throbbing after being on them all day. Tavarius was sitting on the sofa with his laptop, scrolling through something intently. In the kitchen, dirty dishes from lunch were piled in the sink. Crumbs were scattered on the table, along with an empty tea mug and a torn-open package of cookies. Keziah silently took off her coat, went into the kitchen, and started washing the dishes. "Kez, you could at least take a breath first," Tavarius threw out without looking up from his screen. "You always doing too much." "If I don't wash them, who will?" she answered wearily, soaping up a plate. "Man, whatever. Ideally, you wash them later. The house ain't gonna crumble in one night." Keziah didn't answer. It was useless. They used to cook dinner together, clean up together, make plans for the weekend together. He used to spend entire Saturdays helping her reorganize the closet or paint the walls. Now, she felt like a maid in her own home. She finished the dishes, wiped the table, put the groceries in the fridge, then heated up some leftover soup for herself and sat down. Tavarius walked into the kitchen, poured himself some tea from the kettle she had boiled that morning, grabbed an apple from the bowl, and went back to the sofa. "Tav, let's go somewhere this Sunday," Keziah suggested cautiously, finishing her soup. "Maybe just a walk in Millennium Park or down by the lake." "We haven't gone anywhere together in a long time. Must be 3 months now." "Kez, my mind is on business." He waved her off, eyes glued to the screen. "I ain't got time for strolls right now. Don't you get that I'm in a crucial phase? I'm on the verge of a major breakthrough. Dion found an investor who's ready to put money into our project. I gotta prep the pitch deck, the business plan, and here you are talking about walks." Keziah fell silent. A major breakthrough. She had heard those words hundreds of times over the last 3 years. The breakthrough never came. Just another investor, another project, another set of promises. She finished her soup, washed her bowl, and went to the computer. She had to finish reports for 2 clients by morning. She sat at the desk in the corner of their tiny bedroom, turned on the lamp, and buried herself in numbers. Through the wall, the TV was blaring. Tavarius had put the game on. Every now and then he'd shout something, commenting on the play. That was how her days went, day after day, week after week, month after month. Work, home, work, home. She had forgotten the last time she bought something new for herself. Her jeans were worn thin at the knees. Her boots desperately needed repair. The sole was peeling off, and her feet got wet in the slush. But there wasn't enough money for a new winter coat. Tavarius had asked for $1,000 last month for equipment for his latest venture, and she couldn't say no. And Keziah noticed how Tavarius had changed. He started looking at her with a certain disdain, as if she were a burden, an obstacle, something stopping him from being successful. "You should really join a gym," he said one evening while she was changing for bed. "You really let yourself go. Look at you." Keziah froze, her t-shirt in her hands. She stood there in her old bra and the sweatpants she wore around the house, looking at him, not believing her ears. "Tav, I'm just tired," she said quietly. "I don't have time for the gym. I work from 8 in the morning until midnight." "Excuses," he dismissed, scrolling through his phone timeline. "Everybody finds time if they want to. Look at Shanice, Dion's wife. Now she keeps herself tight. Gym, nails done, always looking fly. And you know what I mean." He didn't finish, but Keziah understood perfectly. She got into bed, turned toward the wall, and clenched her fists under the covers. Tears pricked her throat, but she held them back. She wasn't going to cry. She was just tired, that was all. Tomorrow was a new day, new work, new worries, and tears wouldn't change a thing. A week later, it was a similar situation. They were in the kitchen. Keziah was making dinner, frying burger patties and boiling potatoes. Tavarius was scrolling through some site on his tablet. "You know, Kez, real wives create an environment for their husbands to succeed," he said suddenly. "Take Marquis' wife. She doesn't work at all. She stays home, cooks, cleans, and he handles the business in peace." "Marcus has his own firm that actually makes money," Keziah replied wearily, flipping a patty. "What are we supposed to live on if I don't work?" "See, that's exactly why nothing works out for me." Tavarius flared up. "Because I have to think about bills, about you being tired from work, about you being miserable. I can't focus." "Tavarius." "What, Tavarius?" "If you were bringing in real money, I could focus on development. But instead, it's always, we don't have enough. Always penny pinching. How am I supposed to think big when you're counting every dime?" Keziah turned off the stove. The patties were done. She silently transferred them to a plate and set it on the table. Tavarius took one, took a bite. "Too much salt," he grumbled. She tasted it. The salt was fine. He was just picking fights because he was angry, because he blamed her for his failures, because she was the easiest target. Winter passed and spring arrived. Keziah continued working 2 jobs, continued carrying the weight of everything on her shoulders. Tavarius grew colder and more distant. Sometimes he didn't come home at night at all, claiming he was staying at his boy Dion's place to discuss business plans until late, so it was easier to just crash there. Keziah didn't ask questions. She was afraid to hear the truth, afraid to find out that maybe there was someone else, that he was only living with her out of habit, out of convenience, a free apartment, hot dinner, clean laundry. And then something happened that turned everything upside down. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening in May. Keziah had just gotten back from work, put a pot of rice on the stove, and started chopping vegetables for a salad. Tavarius was sitting in his usual spot on the sofa, but this time he wasn't looking at his laptop. He was on the phone. He was speaking quietly, but there was a strange excitement in his voice. "Yeah, I got it," he mumbled. "Yeah, I'll definitely be there tomorrow." "What time?" 11 a.m. "Okay, I'll be there. Thanks for letting me know." He hung up and sat motionless for a few seconds, staring at a spot on the wall. Then he jumped up abruptly and paced around the room, rubbing his hands together. "What happened?" Keziah asked, looking out from the kitchen, knife in hand. Tavarius turned around. A strange smile was playing on his lips, not sad, not mournful, but greedy. "Granddaddy died," he said. Keziah flinched. The knife almost slipped from her hand. Tavarius's grandfather, Eustace Vance, was very old. He was pushing 90, if she remembered correctly. They had only seen him a couple of times in all their years together. The old man lived in Indianapolis, about a 3-hour drive away. He barely communicated with relatives. But still, death. "Tav, I'm so sorry," she began, wiping her hands on a towel and walking closer. "How did it happen? Was he sick?" "Sorry." Tavarius chuckled strangely, and there wasn't a drop of sorrow in that sound. "Yeah, sure, it's sad. He was 88, but that's not the main thing. The lawyer called. Turns out Granddaddy left a will, and I'm named in it." Keziah blinked, not immediately catching his drift. "A will?" "Yes." Tavarius clenched his fists, his eyes shining with a feverish glint. "He left an inheritance. That means there's something there. He definitely had an apartment, I remember. A 3-bedroom downtown. Maybe something else? Maybe property? Maybe money in accounts? I'm going to the lawyer tomorrow to find out everything." He started pacing the room, rubbing his palms together like a merchant who just closed a lucrative deal. "Finally, Finally, I get a break. You understand, Kez? It's destiny. It's a sign from above. I told you everything would work out for me, that we just had to wait. Keziah stood there watching him. Something inside her shrank and stung painfully. This was how he reacted to his grandfather's death. Not with grief, not with sadness, but with joy over a potential payout. His own flesh and blood had just died, and he was celebrating money. Maybe we should organize the funeral first, she said gently. Send him off properly? Auntie Vernice will handle that. Tavarius waved her off. She lived near him in Indy. They talked all their lives. Let her handle it. I need to handle the inheritance. The lawyer said the reading of the will is the day after tomorrow. I need to be there at 11 a.m. He was wired all evening. He couldn't sit still, pacing from corner to corner, calling friends, sharing the news. He told everyone the same thing. Granddaddy passed, left a will, I'm finna be rich. The rice on the stove boiled over, the water evaporated, and it started to burn. Keziah turned off the gas, threw the contents of the pot in the trash, and just went to the bedroom. She didn't want dinner. There was a lump in her throat, and her chest felt heavy and empty. That night, she couldn't sleep for a long time. She lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to Tavarius in the next room, excitedly discussing things on the phone with yet another friend, thinking about how everything had changed. When she fell in love with him 5 years ago, he was different, kind, attentive, caring. They met at a mutual friend's birthday party, and he seemed so sincere, so open back then. They dated for a year, and it was the happiest year of her life. He brought her flowers for no reason, took her to the movies, made her breakfast. They dreamed together about a family, about kids, about a house they would build. And then they moved in together, and it was like something broke. At first it was subtle, little things, then more and more. He became colder, she became quieter. He became more demanding, she became more submissive. And now, 5 years later, she lay in the dark, realizing she didn't even know who this person next to her was. For the next 2 days, Tavarius was on pins and needles. He was constantly calculating things on a calculator, Googling real estate prices in Indianapolis, looking at condo listings, estimating how much a 3-bedroom downtown might be worth. He made plans out loud. I'm finally going to buy a real car. Not this bucket. I'll open a real office in a prime location. We'll go to the ocean. No, better yet, Europe. I always wanted to see Paris. Tav, don't count your chickens before they hatch, Keziah tried to ground him at dinner. You don't even know exactly what's in the will yet. I know what's gonna be in it, he interrupted arrogantly, waving his fork. I'm the only grandson. Granddaddy has no other direct heirs. Auntie Vernice is his wife's sister, not even blood related. That means everything goes to me. It's only logical. He took a sip of tea and looked at her with an appraising gaze, the kind usually reserved for an object you're deciding whether to keep or throw away. You know, Kez, maybe it really is time you thought about your appearance, he said suddenly. When I get this money, I'm gonna need a wife who matches the status. Look at you. You dress like you digging in the bargain bin at the thrift store. Hair ain't done, no manicure. I'd be embarrassed to take you anywhere decent. Keziah felt the blood rush to her cheeks. Her hands started to tremble. She put her cup on the table, afraid she might drop it. I dress like this because we don't have enough money, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I put every dime toward our bills and your projects. See? There you go again, Tavarius grimaced. Always with the guilt trips. It ain't my fault you don't know how to budget or save. Real women figure out how to look good and keep the house running. Keziah opened her mouth to argue, but the words got stuck in her throat. Tavarius had already gotten up from the table and walked out of the kitchen, not even clearing his plate. She remained sitting alone, staring at the unfinished tea and the remnants of dinner, feeling something inside her finally, irrevocably break. She walked to the mirror in the hallway and looked at herself for a long time. Truly, she didn't look great. An old sweater with lint balls, faded jeans she'd been wearing for 3 years, messy hair with new growth showing, a tired face with deep shadows under the eyes. But was that her fault? She was grinding at 2 jobs so he could play businessman. She denied herself everything just so they could survive, bought the cheapest brands, pinched every penny, and this was how he thanked her, telling her he was ashamed of her, that she didn't match his status. Keziah slowly went back to the kitchen and sat at the table. Her hands were still shaking. She poured herself some water from the pitcher and took a few sips, trying to calm down. She needed to get a grip. Maybe it was just the stress before the inheritance? Maybe when the dust settled, when the euphoria passed, Tavarius would be his old self again. Maybe it could still be fixed. But deep down, in the most hidden corner of her soul, she already knew the truth. Nothing was coming back. The Tavarius she fell in love with 5 years ago was gone, and maybe he never existed at all. The morning started with Tavarius pacing the apartment like a caged animal. He woke up before Keziah, which was an event in itself. Usually he slept until 10 or even noon. But today, at 7:30 a.m., he was already standing in front of the mirror, meticulously brushing his waves and critically examining his shirt. "Does this look okay?" he asked when Keziah came out of the bedroom. "Should I wear a tie?" "No, that's doing too much. It's not a job interview. Although it is an important meeting. Maybe a tie after all?" Keziah looked at him. He was wearing his best shirt, a crisp white one they bought 2 years ago for some holiday. His slacks were decent too, black. He had shined his dress shoes until they gleamed. "It's fine," she said quietly. "You look good." "Of course I look good," he mumbled, turning side to side in front of the mirror. "Today is a big day. Today I find out how much I got." He didn't eat breakfast, just downed a coffee, scalding his mouth. He was nervous, though he tried not to show it. He kept glancing at his watch, checking his phone, then looking at his watch again. "What time do you need to leave?" Keziah asked, pouring herself tea. "By 11, but I'm leaving early to make sure I'm on time. Probably 10 or 9:30, just in case of traffic." "Do you want me to go with you?" she offered cautiously. "For support?" Tavarius whipped around and looked at her as if she had suggested something obscene. "For what?" he snapped. "This is Vance family business. You got nothing to do with it." Keziah sipped her tea, feeling the hot liquid burn her throat. Family business. That meant she wasn't family, even though they had lived together for 5 years. "Okay," was all she said. "Yeah, okay. Auntie Vernice is going to be there with all her preaching. She always knows how to kill a vibe. I don't need extra stress." He checked the mirror one last time, straightened his shirt, and grabbed his jacket. "I'm out. I'll be back when I'm back. Might need to go over documents with the lawyer later this evening." And he left without even saying goodbye. The door slammed, and Keziah was left alone in the empty apartment. She finished her cold tea, washed the cup, and got ready for work. The day promised to be long. At the clinic, time dragged excruciatingly slow. Keziah answered calls mechanically, checked patients in, but her mind was far away. She kept thinking about what was happening at the lawyer's office, what would happen next, how their lives would change if Tavarius actually received a large inheritance. Would he become kind and attentive again, or would he finally turn into the arrogant man she had seen in recent months? During her lunch break, she tried to call him, but he didn't pick up. She sent a text. "How's it going?" It showed as read, but there was no reply. She got home around 7 o'clock p.m. Tavarius wasn't there. The apartment greeted her with silence and emptiness. Keziah heated up yesterday's soup, ate, washed the dishes, then sat at the computer. Work didn't stop. She had to finish a report, but she couldn't focus. She kept listening for sounds in the hallway, waiting for the door to open. Tavarius didn't return until 9:30. Keziah heard the lock click, heard him walk into the entryway. She got up from the computer and went out to meet him. "Well?" she asked, trying to read something, anything, on his face. Tavarius stood in the doorway, a strange smile playing on his lips. Not joyful, not happy, but predatory. "Everything is excellent," he said, pulling off his jacket. "Even better than I thought." "And?" Keziah took a step closer. "What happened?" "An apartment." Tavarius walked into the living room and flopped onto the sofa, leaning back. 3 bedrooms, 1,200 square feet, right in downtown Indianapolis. A lake house property in the suburbs, a bank account, stocks in some company Granddaddy bought God knows when. The lawyer said all in all, it's about $2 million, maybe more. Need to get an appraiser to count it all up. Keziah sat on the edge of the armchair. $2 million. That was huge money, the kind she had never even dreamed of. "Lord have mercy," she exhaled. "It's a whole fortune," Tavarius finished for her. "I'm rich now, Kez. Finally. That's it. No more living in this dump. No more counting pennies. I'm buying a luxury condo, a Benz. I'm launching the business I never had the capital for. Everything is changing." He was saying I, not we. Keziah noticed, but stayed silent. "When can you finalize everything?" she asked. "Lawyer said a week or 2. Need to gather some papers, assess the property, but those are formalities. The main thing is the money is mine." He got up from the sofa and walked to the window. He stood there looking at the evening city, at the lights of the houses. Then he turned and looked at Keziah with a long, appraising stare. "You know, Kez, I got a lot to think about tonight," he said suddenly, and his voice had a strange, cold edge to it. "So I'm gonna go over to Dion's, chill with him, talk it over. I'll be late. Don't wait up." "But Tav..." "That's it. I'm gone." And he left, slamming the door again. Keziah remained sitting in the armchair, staring at the empty space where her husband had just stood. And inside her, a cold, sticky feeling of dread began to grow. For the next 2 days, Tavarius barely showed up at home. He came in late at night when Keziah was already asleep, left early in the morning. They barely spoke. He was immersed in his thoughts, in his plans, and it seemed there was no room for her in those plans. And then, the thing she least expected happened. It was Sunday, around noon. Keziah was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, reading news on her phone. Tavarius was home, but he had locked himself in the bedroom since morning, doing something on the computer. Suddenly, he came out, determination written all over his face. "Keziah, we need to talk," he said, and his tone made Keziah go cold inside. "About what?" she asked, slowly putting down her phone. Tavarius walked into the kitchen, got a glass from the cabinet, poured himself water, drank it in one gulp, then turned to her and said, "I've been thinking about a lot of things these past few days, and I realized one thing. You and me, we're stuck, you know? We've been treading water for years, and I don't want to live like that anymore." "What do you mean?" Keziah stood up from the table, feeling her heart beating faster. "I mean, I need to move forward, start a new life. And you're an anchor, Kez. You're dragging me to the bottom." "Tavarius, what are you saying?" Her voice trembled. "I'm saying we need to break up. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air, and Keziah couldn't believe she had heard them. Divorce. He wants a divorce. Now. Right when he got the money. Are you serious?" she squeezed out. "Dead serious," Tavarius answered coldly. I've thought it all through. It's the best decision for both of us. You'll find someone who suits you, and I'll start a new life. We've lived together for 5 years, Keziah whispered, feeling her legs go weak. 5 years, Tavarius. I supported you all this time. I worked 2 jobs so you could pursue your projects. And I'm grateful for that, he interrupted indifferently. Really. But gratitude ain't love, and love left the building a long time ago. Let's be real. How can you say that? I'm speaking the truth. We got used to each other, but that doesn't mean we gotta be together forever. People change. I changed, and I need something else. Keziah sank back onto the chair. Her legs wouldn't hold her. There was a fog in her head and a pain in her chest so sharp she thought her heart would burst. You waited until you got the money, she said quietly, staring at the floor. That's why you didn't say anything before. You waited. Tavarius stayed silent, and that silence was louder than any words. I packed your stuff, he said finally. It's in the hallway, a suitcase and 2 bags. Everything's there, clothes, makeup, books. You can pick up the rest later whenever you want. Keziah raised her head and looked at him. He stood with his arms crossed, looking down at her. And in that look, there was no regret, no guilt, only cold, calm indifference. You're kicking me out? She asked, her voice sounding foreign and broken. Right now? The sooner the better, he answered. No need to drag out the goodbye, just makes it harder. She stood up on trembling legs and walked slowly to the hallway. Sure enough, there stood her suitcase and 2 duffel bags. He had actually packed her things. While she was at work yesterday, he had methodically folded her clothes, her personal items, preparing to put her out on the street. I prepped the divorce papers, Tavarius said, following her into the hall. He picked up some papers from the side table and handed them to her. It's simple. No property claims, mutual consent. You just need to sign. I'll file it at the county clerk myself. In a month, it'll be finalized. Keziah took the papers with shaking hands. Her eyes scanned the lines, but she couldn't focus, couldn't read. The letters blurred. I don't need you anymore, Tavarius said, and mocking notes crept into his voice. I'm rich now, you get it? I'm going to have a new life. Beautiful, successful, and you stay in your mediocrity, in your poverty. It suits you. He chuckled, looking at her pale face. Did you think I was going to stay with you? Really? You thought I'd want to drag you to the top with me? Look at yourself. You're a plain Jane, Keziah. You're a nobody, and you'll never be the kind of woman a successful man needs. Every word was like a blow. Keziah stood and listened as the man she loved, to whom she gave 5 years of her life, trampled her, humiliated her, destroyed her. And as for your sacrifices, Tavarius continued, making air quotes with his fingers, that was your choice. Nobody forced you to slave away at 2 jobs. You decided that yourself, so don't come at me with complaints now. Keziah looked at him for a long moment, and suddenly something inside snapped. The pain didn't go away, but something else settled over it. Cold, hard, dignity. Where do I sign? She asked in a steady voice. Tavarius looked confused for a moment. Evidently, he expected tears, begging, hysteria. But Keziah stood calmly with her back straight, looking at him with a deadpan gaze. Right here. He pointed a finger at a line at the bottom of the page. And here, on the second page. Keziah took the pen he offered and with a steady hand signed her name. Once, twice, done. 5 years of life crossed out with 2 strokes of a pen. Good, Tavarius said, taking the documents back. Excellent. Quick and no drama. I always knew you were a smart woman." He folded the papers, put them in a folder, then turned to the door and swung it open. "Well, have a nice life," he threw out with a smirk. "Or, as they say, good luck finding a new sucker to take care of you." Keziah silently picked up the suitcase and one bag. They were heavy, but she didn't even wince. She stepped over the threshold, then came back for the second bag. Tavarius stood in the doorway, leaning against the jamb, watching her with that nasty, self-satisfied smile. "You know what, Kez?" he said when she grabbed the second bag. "I almost feel sorry for you. You're a decent female, really. Just not my level, you feel me? I'm playing in the big leagues now." Keziah stopped on the threshold, turned her head, and looked at him. She looked at this man she once loved for the last time and realized there was nothing left. No love, not even hate, just emptiness. "Goodbye, Tavarius," she said quietly and firmly, and walked out without looking back. Behind her, the door slammed, and she heard his laugh, a nasty, gloating laugh. He was laughing at her back, enjoying his victory. Keziah walked down the stairs carrying the heavy bags and stepped out onto the street. It was a bright spring day. The sun was shining, birds were singing. Life was going on, regardless of anything, and she stood in the middle of this life with 2 bags and a suitcase, homeless, husbandless, with a torn heart, but with her head held high. She took out her phone and dialed her best friend, Tasha. "Tasha, it's me," she said when her friend picked up. "Can I come over? I need a place to crash for a few days. I left Tavarius." Her voice finally cracked on the last words, but she pulled herself together. Now was not the time to fall apart. Later there would be tears. Later there would be pain. Right now she just needed to get to Tasha's, to a safe place where she could breathe and figure out what to do next. "Girl, of course. Come on over." Tasha's worried voice came through the receiver. "What happened? You tell me when you get here. I'm waiting for you." Keziah called a lift, put her bags in the trunk, and sat in the back seat. And when the car started moving, when the familiar streets began to float by outside the window, she allowed herself to close her eyes. Only then, in the darkness behind closed lids, did the first tears roll down. Tasha met her at the door of her 1-bedroom apartment with hot tea and a warm hug. She didn't ask unnecessary questions, just helped carry the things in, sat her on the couch, and shoved a mug into her hands. "Drink, tell me later," she said, sitting down next to her. Keziah told her everything. About the inheritance, about the last few months, about how Tavarius kicked her out today, laughing at her back. She spoke quietly, without tears, because the tears had run out in the lift. Only a hollow emptiness remained inside. "What a low-down," Tasha hissed when Keziah finished. "What an absolute dog, Kez. I always sensed something was off with him. But you loved him, so I kept my mouth shut." "I did love him," Keziah answered quietly, but apparently that wasn't enough. The first few days, she just existed. She slept on the pull-out couch, went to work, came back, ate something, went back to sleep, mechanically, without thoughts. Tasha tried to get her to talk, to distract her, but Keziah only shook her head and retreated into herself. Her phone was silent. Tavarius didn't call, didn't text, as if she had never existed in his life. And then, on the 4th day, an unknown number called. "Ms. Keziah Vance?" a male voice asked when she answered. She had taken his last name. "Yes, this is she. This is the Hightower Law Firm. My name is Attorney Thaddeus Sterling. I represent the estate of the late Eustace Vance. I need to meet with you regarding the inheritance matter." Keziah was confused. "But I'm not a relative," she said. "That's my ex-husband's grandfather. We are divorced. Well, the paperwork is being processed. That is precisely why I need to meet with you urgently." There was a certain urgency in the man's voice. It is very important. Can you come in today, say around 3? Keziah looked at her watch. It was 11 o'clock a.m. She was just getting ready for work. I can come at 6 after work, she said. Excellent. We'll expect you at 6. Do you know the address? 1200 South Michigan Avenue, Suite 305. Okay, I'll be there. All day, Keziah thought about this call. Why did she need to go to the lawyer? What could possibly involve her in Tavarius's grandfather's inheritance? She barely knew the old man, saw him only twice. At 6:15 p.m., she stood in front of the office door, hesitated, took a deep breath, and walked in. In the reception area, a middle-aged woman in a strict suit sat at a desk. Good evening, I'm Keziah Vance. I was called. Go right in. They're waiting for you. The woman nodded at the office door. Keziah walked in. At a large desk sat a man in his 50s with graying hair and an attentive gaze. And on a chair by the window sat an elderly woman in a black dress and a church hat. Keziah recognized her. It was Auntie Vernice, the wife's sister Tavarius had mentioned, and standing next to her against the wall was Tavarius himself. He looked pale. His eyes darted between the lawyer and Keziah. When she entered, he twitched as if he wanted to say something but stayed silent. Ms. Vance, please, have a seat, the lawyer said, pointing to the chair opposite him. She sat down, placing her purse on her lap. Her heart was beating somewhere in her throat. My name is Thaddeus Sterling. I am handling the estate of Eustace Vance, the lawyer began. I needed to find you urgently because a delicate situation has arisen. He opened a folder on the desk and took out several sheets of paper. The fact is, the deceased's will contained a condition, which I informed the heir about only in general terms at our first meeting. But now it is necessary to read it in full in the presence of all interested parties. Tavarius clenched his fists. Keziah saw it in her peripheral vision, but tried to look only at the lawyer. I will read you the full text of the inheritance clause, continued Attorney Sterling, putting on his glasses. Quote, all my property, including the apartment at 8 Central Street, the lake house property in rural Indiana, funds in Chase bank accounts, as well as the stock portfolio, I bequeath to my grandson, Tavarius Vladimir Vance. However, he may receive this inheritance only upon fulfillment of the following condition. At the time of claiming the inheritance, Tavarius Vance must be in a legal marriage with his current spouse, Keziah Vance, continuously for a period of no less than 1 year from the moment of my death. The lawyer paused and looked over his glasses at Tavarius. Furthermore, in the event that the marriage is dissolved before the expiration of said term, or if at the time of my death Tavarius Vance is not married to Keziah Vance, all the aforementioned property shall transfer in full to Keziah Vance, as a person who has shown true nobility and dignity. Silence hung in the office. Keziah didn't immediately understand what she had heard. The words came slowly, as if through cotton. The inheritance goes to her if the marriage is dissolved, and they had already signed the divorce papers. That's impossible, Tavarius squeezed out, stepping toward the desk. That can't be. Granddaddy couldn't write that. The will was drafted 2 years ago, the lawyer replied calmly. Notarized properly, signed in the presence of witnesses. It is absolutely legal. But why? Tavarius grabbed his head. Why did he do that? I'm his grandson, his only grandson. Auntie Vernice rose heavily from her chair and looked at Tavarius with sadness. Because Eustace saw right through you, she said quietly but firmly. 2 years ago, when he came to visit y'all in Chicago for the last time, he stayed with you for a couple of days. Remember? Tavarius was silent, his face turning white. He saw how you treat Keziah, the old woman continued. How you boss her around. How you take advantage of her working 2 jobs. He saw that she is a good woman, and you are selfish and rude, and that's when he decided to change the will. He came to my office, the lawyer picked up. He said he wanted to protect a decent person, that if you stayed married for at least a year after his death, it meant you two needed each other after all, and the inheritance would go to you. But if you divorced, it meant Keziah deserved compensation for all the years she endured your relationship. Tavarius collapsed onto a chair, covering his face with his hands. When did you file for divorce? The lawyer asked, flipping through papers. I filed the application the day before yesterday, Tavarius answered hollowly. Expedited procedure. I paid extra to get it done fast. And the divorce is already registered, the lawyer nodded. Yesterday at 3:00 p.m., here is the stamp in the database, so the condition of the will has been violated. The marriage was dissolved earlier than 1 year after the testator's death. Consequently, according to the will, all property transfers to Kezia Vance. Keziah sat motionless, her head spinning. This was unreal. $2 million. The condo, the lake house, all of it was hers now? Not Tavarius's, who threw her out of the house laughing, hers? No, Tavarius rasped, jumping up. No, that's mine. That's my inheritance. I'm the grandson. I have the right. You had the right, the lawyer corrected, up until the moment you divorced your wife. Now the right has passed to her. This is the will of the deceased, and it is being executed in accordance with the law. Tavarius spun around to face Keziah. His eyes burned with a feverish gleam. Kez, he breathed, taking a step toward her. Kez, listen. It's all a mistake, stupidity. I didn't mean what I said back then. I was just stressed, because of the whole inheritance story. I didn't really think that. Keziah watched him silently. We can fix everything, he continued, dropping to his knees right in front of her, right in the middle of the office. We can get married again. The divorce was only finalized yesterday. We can cancel it, right? He turned to the lawyer. We can file some motion, withdraw the divorce? You cannot withdraw the divorce, the lawyer answered dryly. But you can enter into a new marriage. However, that will no longer be the marriage referred to in the will. The condition of continuous marital relations has been violated. Then we'll get married again anyway. Tavarius grabbed Keziah's hands. His palms were clammy, sticky. You hear me, Kez? We'll get married. Everything will be like before, even better. I'll change, I swear. I'll be different. I'll love you, take care of you. Keziah silently pulled her hands away. Kez, please, his voice trembled. Don't do this. Don't destroy my life. Granddaddy wanted us to be together, see? He wanted to test us. And we passed the test. We just didn't know about it. You failed the test, Keziah said quietly, looking him in the eye. You kicked me out of the house. You laughed at me. You said I was a plain Jane who wasn't worthy of you. I didn't mean it, he exclaimed. I was a fool. Forgive me. I'm on my knees asking, forgive me. Keziah stood up. Tavarius remained on his knees, looking up at her. There was panic in his eyes, despair, but not repentance. No shame for what he had done, only the fear of losing the money. Get up, Tavarius, she said calmly. Don't humiliate yourself. I'll do anything. He clutched the hem of her coat. Anything you say. We'll get married, and I'll give you half the inheritance. No, more than half. You get 60%. 70, Kez, please. She gently removed his hands and stepped back. I don't want to marry you, she said quietly but firmly. Not for all the money in the world, no Tavarius. You killed everything that was between us. You killed it with your words, with your laughter when you threw me out, and I don't want to go back to that life, not for anything. She turned to the lawyer. What do I need to do to claim the inheritance? Attorney Sterling nodded with respect. You'll need to come in a few times, sign documents, process the certificate of inheritance rights. I'll explain everything. We can start right now if you wish. I wish, said Keziah. Kez, wait! Tavarius jumped to his feet. You can't just take everything. It's mine, my inheritance. I'll sue. I'll find a way to contest the will. You can try, said the lawyer, but the will is drafted competently. All formalities are observed. The deceased was of sound mind and memory, confirmed by medical records. The court will not take your side. I won't leave it like this, shouted Tavarius. I'll get justice. Justice has already been served, said Auntie Vernice quietly, walking up to Keziah. She took her hand and squeezed it. Eustace was a wise man. He knew what he was doing. My dear, I am glad it turned out this way. You are a good person, and you deserve this inheritance more than anyone. Tears welled up in Keziah's eyes. For the first time in days, not from pain, but from gratitude, from relief. Thank you, she whispered. Tavarius stood in the middle of the office, pale, with glazed eyes. Everything collapsed in a single second. $2 million, the new life, all his plans, everything turned to dust. And he only had himself to blame. You may go, Mr. Vance, the lawyer said. Your presence is no longer required. Ms. Vance will stay. We need to discuss details. Tavarius opened his mouth, but no words came out. He stood for a few more seconds, then turned around and walked out of the office. The door closed behind him with a quiet click. Keziah exhaled. Only now did she realize she hadn't been breathing this whole time. Her legs gave way, and she sank back into the chair. Are you okay? The lawyer asked concernedly. Water? No, thank you. It's all so unexpected. I understand, but believe me, Eustace made the right choice. He spoke a lot about you when he was drafting the will. He said you were the only person in his grandson's circle worthy of respect. Keziah nodded, not knowing what to say. Auntie Vernice sat next to her and hugged her shoulders. Hold on, baby, she whispered. The worst is over. Now a new life begins. Yes, thought Keziah. A new life. Without Tavarius, without humiliation, without counting every penny. With $2 million she couldn't even imagine. It felt like a dream, scary and beautiful at the same time. Keziah left the law office at dusk. In her hands was a folder with documents. In her head a fog, but in her chest a strange, weightless feeling, as if she were floating above the ground. Everything that happened seemed unreal, as if someone else had received this inheritance. She was just watching from the sidelines. She took out her phone and called Tasha. Tasha, you won't believe it, she said when her friend answered. I became the heiress. Everything went to me. $2 million. Silence hung on the other end. Then a scream rang out. What? Keziah? Are you serious? How? Keziah explained on the way as she walked to the L train station. About the will, about the condition, about how Tavarius stood on his knees and begged her to come back. She spoke and didn't believe her own words. That is simply incredible, Tasha exhaled. Kez, do you understand what this means? You're free, you're rich, you can do whatever you want. I haven't realized it yet, admitted Keziah, going down into the subway. It's like a dream. The following days flew by in a whirlwind of events. Trips to the lawyer, signing documents, meetings with property appraisers, opening bank accounts. Auntie Vernice helped with everything, explained what was what, supported her. It turned out she knew about Eustace's plans from the very beginning. "He told me when he was writing the will," the old woman said, sitting with Keziah in a soul food cafe after another visit to the lawyer. "He said, 'Vernice, I saw how that boy treats his wife. He's selfish and a dog. If he doesn't change in a year, let her at least get compensation for all those years.' Eustace was a fair man. He couldn't stand injustice." Keziah listened and felt gratitude toward the old man she barely knew. He protected her even after death, gave her a chance to start over. But Tavarius didn't give up. He called every day. First he begged, then he threatened, then he begged again. He came to Tasha's building, staked out her workplace. Keziah didn't talk to him, walked past him, but he would catch up to her, grab her arm. "Kez, you can't do this to me!" he shouted in the middle of the street, ignoring passers-by. "We lived together for 5 years. 5 years. Do they mean nothing?" "Did they mean nothing to you?" Keziah answered calmly, freeing her hand. "You proved that yourself when you kicked me out." "I explained I wasn't myself. Forgive me, give me one more chance." But she walked past, again and again, and each time it became easier. The pain dulled, went away, turned into indifference. One evening he showed up at Tasha's door. Keziah opened it and saw him, haggard in a wrinkled shirt with puffy eyes. He stood with a bouquet of wilting roses in his hands. "I sleep here on the stairs every night," he said hoarsely. "Waiting for you, Kez. Please, I can't be without you. Come back, we'll get married. I'll give you all the inheritance if you want. Every penny. Just be with me." Keziah looked at him for a long moment and realized nothing remained. No pity, no sympathy. This man was a stranger to her. "Tavarius, you don't understand," she said quietly. "It's not about the money. It's about the fact that you showed your true face. You humiliated me, threw me out like trash, and I don't want to be with a man capable of that. Never again." "But people make mistakes," he pleaded. "I made a mistake. I admit it. But we can start over." "No, we can't. Goodbye, Tavarius." She closed the door. Behind it, she heard pounding, pleas, then sobbing. Tasha looked at her friend with admiration. "Kez, you did good," she said. "I'm proud of you." Keziah leaned against the door and closed her eyes. Yes, she did the right thing. She knew it with all her heart. A week later, the inheritance paperwork was finalized. Keziah became the owner of the condo downtown, the lake house, the bank accounts, and the stock portfolio, which, according to specialists, was worth more than initially thought, bringing the total value to around $2.5 million. She sat in her new apartment, huge, bright, with high ceilings and windows overlooking the courtyard, and couldn't believe this was her home now. The furniture was old but high quality. Paintings hung on the walls, books stood on the shelves. Granddaddy Eustace had lived a long life here, and in every corner she felt his aura, calm, wise. Keziah got up and walked to the window. The city buzzed below, people rushing somewhere, cars driving. She stood here, in this apartment, and for the first time in years felt free, truly free. She called the clinic and put in her resignation. She quit the second bookkeeping job, too. No more slaving away for 14 hours a day. No more penny pinching. "What are you going to do now?" Tasha asked when they met for lunch. "I don't know," Keziah admitted, stirring her iced tea. "I want to live for myself. Maybe learn something new. I always wanted to learn French properly, and I want to travel, see the world." "You deserve it," Tasha smiled, "after everything you've been through." Keziah signed up for French classes, then painting classes. She loved to draw as a child, but then life got in the way. Now she had time for everything. She bought clothes she liked, went to beauty salons, to the hairdresser. Gradually, day by day, she returned to herself, to that Keziah she had buried under the weight of fatigue and humiliation. A month later, Auntie Vernice invited her for tea. They sat in the kitchen of the old lady's apartment, and Keziah talked about her plans. "And I also want to get into philanthropy," she said. "Help people who fell into hard times like I did, sisters who were left without support." "Eustace would approve," Auntie Vernice smiled, pouring tea into cups. "He always said money should bring value, not just lie around like dead weight." "You know Tavarius tried to contest the will?" Keziah asked. "I heard, but just as the lawyer predicted, the judge threw the case out. The will was airtight, no grounds for contest." Keziah nodded. She felt no gloating, no satisfaction from this news, just accepted it as a fact. "How is he now?" she asked, surprised at her own curiosity. "Bad," sighed Auntie Vernice. "Broke, homeless. He was renting that 2-bedroom y'all lived in, from what I understand. He's living on Dion's couch now, trying to find a job, but nobody's hiring him. No real experience, and his ego is too big for entry level. Rumor has it he linked up with some girl, but she left him quick when she realized he didn't have a dime." Keziah finished her tea. She didn't feel sorry for Tavarius. He got what he deserved. Time passed. Keziah went to Italy, her first time abroad. She stood on a bridge in Venice and cried from happiness, from the beauty, from the fact that she was here, that she was free, that her whole life was ahead of her. She learned to paint, and it turned out she was pretty good at it. She opened a small charitable foundation that helped women in crisis situations, paying for lawyers during divorces, helping with housing, with job searches. "You've changed," Tasha said as they walked through Grant Park on a warm autumn day. "You look younger." "I feel reborn," admitted Keziah. "Like I lived my whole life in a dungeon, and now I stepped into the light." And it was true. She blossomed, cut her hair into a chic style, colored it, lost weight, not from diets, but simply because she stopped stress eating. She started smiling, laughing, living. And then, 6 months after that memorable day at the law office, a meeting happened. Keziah was in a coffee shop, the same one where she and Tasha often sat. She ordered a cappuccino and a croissant, sat by the window, reading a book. Suddenly the door opened, and Tavarius walked in. He saw her immediately, froze in the doorway. She looked up from her book and met his gaze. He had aged, looked gaunt, lost weight. He was wearing a cheap jacket, faded jeans, unwashed hair, stubble on his face. Next to him was a girl, young, maybe 23, no more, bleached blonde weave, heavy makeup. She was saying something to him in an irritated tone. "How much longer, T? You promised to take me to a real restaurant, and you bring me to this spot? Do you even have money?" "I got it, Candy, I got it," mumbled Tavarius, not taking his eyes off Keziah. Just a little tight right now. Later, later." "Later, later," the girl huffed. "All you do is promise. If I knew you were a scrub, I wouldn't have even looked your way." They walked to the counter. Tavarius ordered 2 coffees, his hands shaking as he dug change out of his pockets, counting it. The girl looked at him with contempt. Keziah watched this scene without any emotion. Here he was, the man who once laughed at her, called her a plain Jane, said she wasn't good enough for him. Now he had become exactly what he thought she was, a nobody. And the girl next to him looked at him exactly the way he looked at Keziah 6 months ago. Tavarius took the coffees and turned around. Their eyes met again. He took a step toward her, but Keziah looked away and went back to her book. Just continued reading, as if he wasn't there. "Tav, why are you standing there?" the girl called out. "Let's sit down." He stood for another second, then turned and followed her to a table in the corner. Keziah saw in her peripheral vision how they sat down, how the girl continued to complain about something, how Tavarius sat hunched over, staring into his cup. Keziah finished her coffee, finished her croissant, left a generous tip, grabbed her purse, and walked out of the cafe. She didn't look back, didn't approach, just walked past like you walk past a stranger. It was sunny and warm outside, Indian summer. Keziah stopped on the sidewalk, lifted her face to the sun, and smiled. Her phone rang in her pocket. It was Auntie Vernice, inviting her to the lake house, said the apples were ripe and it was time to harvest. "Of course I'll come," said Keziah, "this weekend." She walked down the street, and for the first time in years, there was no heaviness in her chest. No fear for tomorrow, no shame, no pain. There was just life, new, bright, full of possibilities, and it belonged only to her. She passed a travel agency window and stopped. Photos hung on the display: Paris, Prague, Barcelona. Keziah thought for a moment. Maybe it was time to go somewhere else. Paris, for example. Tavarius once said he wanted to go there when he got rich, but he didn't get rich, and she did. She smiled at her reflection in the window. No, not Paris. Paris could wait. Right now, she just wanted to live here, in this city, enjoy every day, paint, learn, help people through her foundation, be herself. And what happened with Tavarius? That was already another life, a stranger's life, the past. She closed that door and would never open it again. Never. She took out her phone and dialed Tasha. "Tasha, let's go out tonight. Maybe the theater or that new soul food spot on the Riverwalk?" "I'd love to," her friend rejoiced. "You sound especially happy today." "Just a good mood," smiled Keziah. She hung up and walked further down the sunny street. And her chest felt light, bright, as if she were flying, not walking. As if the whole world had opened up before her, full of colors and possibilities. And somewhere in the cafe behind her sat Tavarius, staring at the bottom of an empty coffee cup, cursing the day he decided money was more important than love, and pride was more valuable than humanity. But that was no longer her business. That was his life, his choice, his consequences, and she had her own life, finally her own, and it was beautiful. That evening, Keziah stood on the balcony of her condo with a glass of wine in her hand. Below, the city lights twinkled. Somewhere music played. People laughed. She looked at the stars and thought about that old man she barely knew, but who gave her a second life. "Thank you, Granddaddy Eustace," she whispered into the night. "Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for justice. I won't let you down. I will live this life with dignity." The wind caught her words and carried them somewhere into the darkness, and Keziah finished her wine, went back into the apartment, and went to bed, calmly, without nightmares, without anxiety, just sleep, knowing that tomorrow would be a new day, and it would be a good one, because now every day was a good one, because she was free, finally free, and that was true happiness. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect,